Jake Sullivan felt the cold bite of the cryo chamber as it hissed open around him. His body ached like he had been sleeping for years instead of the planned 3 weeks. The UNS Valiant hummed quietly around him, but something felt wrong. The lights were dimmer than they should be, and the air tasted stale. He pulled himself from the chamber and stumbled toward the bridge. The ship felt empty. Too empty. Jake called out for his crew, but heard only the echo of his own voice bouncing off the metal walls. His feet moved faster now as worry crept into his chest. The bridge was dark except for the emergency lighting that cast red shadows across the control panels. Captain Rodriguez should have been here. Engineer Thompson should have been running diagnostics. Medical Officer Walsh should have been checking on the crew. But they were all gone. Jake checked the crew quarters first. Each room was empty with beds that looked like they had not been slept in for days. Personal items sat exactly where they had been left before the mission began. Coffee cups still sat on tables with dried rings showing where the liquid had been. Pictures of families smiled from nightstands at rooms that would never see their owners again. The medical bay told a different story. Bodies lay on tables covered by white sheets. Jake pulled back the first sheet and saw Rodriguez staring up at nothing with dead eyes. The next sheet revealed Thompson with burn marks across his chest. Walsh lay on the third table with her medical scanner still clutched in her hand. Jake felt his stomach turn as he counted 12 bodies total. His entire crew was dead and he was the only one left alive. He ran to the computer terminal and pulled up the ship logs. The timestamp showed that 3 months had passed since he entered cryosleep. 3 months of drifting through space while his crew died around him. The last log entry was from Rodriguez, dated 2 weeks after Jake went into the chamber. The captain's voice played through the speakers with static crackling around his words. "This is Captain Rodriguez of the UNS Valiant, making what may be our final log entry. We received a distress signal from New Eden Colony 3 days ago, but when we arrived the entire planet was burning. 12 million humans dead. The Galactic Council ships were pulling back when we got there." Jake felt ice form in his veins. New Eden was humanity's newest and largest colony outside Earth's solar system. 12 million people had called it home, including his sister and her family. The log continued as Rodriguez explained how Council forces had attacked without warning and burned the cities from orbit. The captain had ordered an immediate return to Earth, but Council ships had pursued them. "They hit us with some kind of energy weapon that I have never seen before," Rodriguez said through the static. "It did not destroy the ship, but it is killing the crew slowly. Dr. Walsh thinks it is some kind of radiation that attacks human DNA specifically. We are all showing symptoms now. Fever, bleeding, organ failure. Walsh says we have maybe a week left." The log entry ended with Rodriguez explaining that they had put Jake into a deeper cryosleep and rerouted power to keep his chamber running. They hoped someone would find the ship and wake him so he could warn Earth about what had happened. The last words were barely a whisper as Rodriguez fought to stay conscious long enough to finish recording. Jake sat in the captain's chair and stared at the star field outside. Somewhere out there, the Galactic Council had murdered his crew, his sister, and 12 million other humans. He pulled up the navigation system and saw that the ship had been drifting in an unknown sector for months. The fuel cells were nearly empty and the life support was running on backup power. He activated the long-range sensors and began scanning for any signs of human ships or colonies. The results made his blood run cold. Signal after signal showed the same pattern. Human settlements that had been broadcasting regularly for years were now silent. Colonies that should have been expanding were showing no signs of life. Even the military stations that guarded the outer territories were dark. Jake pulled up the Council's public communication channels and found their official statement about the human problem. High Arbiter Veltar spoke from the Council chambers, on Zentara Prime with his 4 arms gesturing dramatically as he explained why humanity had to be contained. The humans had violated the Terran Accords by developing weapons that threatened galactic peace. They had expanded too quickly and refused to accept their proper place in the cosmic order. But Jake knew the real reason. He had seen the classified reports before his mission began. Humanity was advancing too fast for the older races to control. Human ships were becoming faster and more efficient. Human colonies were growing larger and more productive. Human scientists were making discoveries, that had taken other species centuries to achieve. The Council was afraid of being left behind, so they decided to eliminate the threat. Jake checked the ship's database for any other human vessels in the area. Most of the transponder codes showed no response, but one signal caught his attention. A faint beacon was broadcasting from an asteroid field 2 days away. The code identified it as a research vessel called the Pioneer with Dr. Lisa Parker as the chief scientist. Jake had worked with Parker before and knew she was brilliant and resourceful. He diverted all remaining power to the engines and set course for the asteroid field. The Valiant limped through space like a wounded animal, but it still moved. Jake spent the journey going through his crew's personal files and recording messages for their families back on Earth. If Earth was still there, if there was anyone left to deliver the messages, the asteroid field appeared on his screens as a chaotic maze of spinning rocks and ice. The Pioneer's beacon led him to a small research station built into one of the larger asteroids. Jake docked the Valiant and prepared to transfer to the station. He sealed his crew's bodies in the cargo bay and set the ship's computer to broadcast their final messages if anyone ever found the vessel. Dr. Lisa Parker met him at the airlock with tears in her eyes. She had been monitoring communication channels and knew that Jake was probably one of the last humans still alive in this sector. Her research team had been studying ancient alien artifacts when the attacks began. They had watched helplessly as every human colony in their area went silent one by one. "Jake," she said as they embraced, "I am so sorry about your crew, about everyone. The Council has gone completely insane. They are not just attacking our military bases. They are targeting civilian populations and research stations. Anyone who carries human DNA is being hunted down and killed." Jake felt anger building in his chest like a fire that would never go out. The Galactic Council thought they could eliminate humanity like an inconvenient pest. They thought humans would just disappear quietly without fighting back. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Lisa Parker led Jake through the research station's narrow corridors past equipment that hummed with alien technology. Her team had been studying artifacts from a dead civilization when the Council's attack began. Now those same artifacts might be humanity's only hope for survival. The station was small but well hidden inside the asteroid's core, where scanners could not detect human life signs. "We have been monitoring Council communications for weeks," Lisa explained as they walked. "They are calling it the final solution. Every human settlement outside the Sol system has been marked for elimination. Even the diplomatic stations where our ambassadors worked have been destroyed." Jake felt his hands clench into fists as Lisa showed him the intelligence they had gathered. The Council had been planning this attack for months while still negotiating trade agreements and scientific exchanges with human governments. They had smiled and shaken hands with human diplomats while secretly preparing weapons designed specifically to kill human DNA. "What about Earth?" Jake asked. "Have they attacked the home system yet?" Lisa's face went pale as she pulled up the latest reports. "Not yet, but they are preparing something called the Starbreaker. Our sources say it can destabilize a planet's core and make it explode from the inside. They want to make sure no humans escape before they use it on Earth." The research station's main lab was filled with alien devices that glowed with strange lights. Lisa's team had been working around the clock to understand the technology they had discovered. The artifacts belonged to a race called the Architects, who had vanished from the galaxy thousands of years ago. Their technology was far more advanced than anything the Council possessed. "Look at this," Lisa said, as she activated one of the devices. The air above it shimmered and showed a holographic star map with thousands of systems marked in different colors. The Architects mapped every inhabited world in the galaxy, including many that the Council has never found. But more importantly, they left behind information about other species that were eliminated by the Council's predecessors. Jake studied the map and saw the pattern. Throughout galactic history, the dominant civilizations had repeatedly destroyed any species that showed potential to surpass them. The current Council was just the latest group to use genocide as a way to maintain power. Dozens of intelligent races had been wiped out over the millennia for the crime of being too successful. "We are not the first," Jake said quietly. "And we will not be the last unless someone stops this cycle." Lisa nodded and activated another device that showed detailed information about extinct civilizations. The Corvin had been a reptilian species with natural camouflage abilities that made them excellent scouts and spies. The Ashanti were silicon-based beings who could interface directly with electronic systems. The builders created construction technology that could assemble entire cities in days. All of them had been eliminated when they became too successful. But some survived, Lisa said with excitement in her voice. Small groups went into hiding and their descendants are still out there. The Council thinks they are extinct, but they are wrong. I have been receiving coded messages from resistance cells throughout this sector. Jake felt hope for the first time since waking up. If other oppressed species were fighting back then, humanity might not be alone in this war. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, as the old saying went. Together they might have a chance against the Council's superior numbers and technology. Lisa showed him the communication logs from the past few weeks. Short encrypted messages had been coming from hidden bases throughout the Outer Rim. Most were in languages that humans had never encountered, but the universal translators could make sense of the basic meaning. Someone called Captain Steve Martinez was coordinating resistance activities from a mobile base that moved between asteroid fields. Martinez was a military officer before the attacks began, Lisa explained. He escaped when the Council destroyed the defense station at Proxima Base. Now he is gathering survivors and coordinating hit-and-run attacks against Council supply lines. Jake studied Martinez's messages and recognized the tactical thinking of a professional soldier. The resistance was staying mobile and avoiding direct confrontation while gathering intelligence and resources. They were preparing for something bigger but needed more information about Council capabilities and weaknesses. We need to make contact with Martinez, Jake said. If he is organizing a resistance, then we should be part of it. Lisa agreed and began preparing for departure. The research station could not be moved, but the most important artifacts could be transported on smaller ships. Her team had been working to crack the architect's database, which contained detailed information about advanced technologies that the Council had never seen. As they prepared to leave, Lisa showed Jake the most important discovery her team had made. Hidden in the architect data was information about something called quantum consciousness. It was a way of thinking that allowed certain species to interface directly with technology, using only their minds. The architects had possessed this ability, and it had made them the most advanced civilization in galactic history. The scans I have been running suggest that humans might have this same capability, Lisa said. Our brains show the same quantum patterns that the architect data describes. We just need to learn how to access it. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. If humans could learn to control technology with their minds, then they would have an advantage that no other current species possessed. The Council feared human adaptability and innovation, but they had no idea how much potential humanity really had. The journey to find Martinez took them through 3 different asteroid fields and past the burned remains of 2 human colonies. Each destroyed settlement was a reminder of what the Council had done and what they planned to do to Earth. Jake felt his anger growing stronger with each mile they traveled. They found Martinez's base hidden inside a hollowed-out asteroid that had been fitted with engines and weapons. The base could move like a ship when necessary, but looked like a normal space rock to enemy scanners. Inside, Jake met the most diverse group of beings he had ever seen working together. Captain Steve Martinez was a tall man with gray hair and scars across his face from recent battles. He greeted Jake and Lisa with the grim smile of someone who had seen too much death but refused to give up fighting. Around him worked humans, Corvin with their shimmering scales, and Ashanti whose crystalline bodies sparkled in the artificial light. "Welcome to the Resistance," Martinez said as he showed them around the base. "We are small, but we are growing every day. The Council made a mistake when they tried to eliminate everyone at once. They left enough survivors to cause them serious problems." Jake met the other Resistance leaders and learned about their capabilities. The Corvin could infiltrate Council ships without being detected. The Ashanti could hack into electronic systems that other species could not even access. The humans provided leadership and tactical coordination that held the diverse group together. "We have been hitting supply convoys and communication relays," Martinez explained. "Nothing big enough to make them send a major fleet after us, but enough to slow down their operations. We are also gathering intelligence about their plans and capabilities." Lisa shared the information they had discovered about the Starbreaker weapon and the Council's plan to destroy Earth. Martinez's expression grew dark as he realized the timeline they were working with. The Council would not wait much longer before using their ultimate weapon. "We need to move faster," Martinez said. "If they destroy Earth, then humanity is finished even if some of us survive out here. But we also need more firepower if we are going to take on their main fleet." Jake studied the tactical displays that showed Council ship movements throughout the sector. Their formations were strong, but they followed predictable patterns based on standard military doctrine. The Council had been the dominant power for so long that they had become overconfident and rigid in their thinking. "What if we do not try to match their firepower?" Jake suggested. "What if we use their own strength against them?" Martinez raised an eyebrow and waited for Jake to explain. Jake pointed to the quantum consciousness research that Lisa had brought from the station. If humans could learn to interface with technology directly, then they might be able to turn captured Council ships into weapons that could be controlled by human minds. "It is crazy enough that it might work," Martinez said after hearing the plan. "The Council would never expect their own ships to turn against them. But we need to test this quantum consciousness ability first." Lisa set up her equipment in the base's laboratory and began running tests on volunteers from the Resistance. The results were better than anyone had hoped. Not only could humans interface with alien technology, but they could do it more effectively than the original designers had intended. Human creativity and adaptability allowed them to use the technology in ways that the rigid Council minds could never imagine. The Resistance had found their weapon. The Resistance base buzzed with activity as Jake watched Lisa Parker connect human volunteers to alien technology. Each test revealed more about humanity's hidden potential. Lieutenant Amy Johnson, a young engineer who had escaped the New Eden massacre, sat in the testing chair with neural interface cables attached to her temples. The alien device hummed as Amy's consciousness merged with its systems. "I can see everything," Amy whispered with wonder in her voice. "The ship's entire network is like a map in my mind. I can control navigation, weapons, life support, all of it at the same time." Jake felt amazement and fear as he watched Amy demonstrate abilities that should have been impossible. She was controlling a captured Council patrol ship from inside the asteroid base. The ship's engines fired in precise patterns while its weapons targeted dummy asteroids with perfect accuracy, all without touching a single control panel. Captain Martinez stood beside Jake watching the demonstration with the calculating eyes of a military strategist. "If we can teach this to more humans, then we can turn the Council's own fleet against them," he said. "But we need to move carefully. One mistake and they will adapt their defenses." Lisa disconnected Amy from the interface and ran through the data they had collected. Human brains showed quantum patterns that were completely unique among known species. The ability seemed to be present in all humans but required training and practice to develop properly. More importantly, humans could adapt and improvise with alien technology in ways that its original designers never intended. The architects built their technology to be controlled by quantum consciousness, Lisa explained. But they thought in very structured and logical ways. Human creativity allows us to use their devices for purposes they never imagined. Jake studied the tactical implications as Lisa continued her research. If the Resistance could capture enough Council ships and convert them for human control, they might have a chance against the superior numbers of the enemy fleet. But they needed a bigger target than supply convoys and patrol ships. Martinez gathered the Resistance leadership around a holographic display showing Council fleet movements. The enemy was preparing for their final assault on Earth with over 1,000 ships gathering at staging areas throughout the galaxy. At the center of the formation was the dreadnought that carried the Starbreaker weapon. "Intelligence reports say the Starbreaker will be ready for deployment within 2 weeks," Martinez said. "After that, Earth has maybe days before they use it. We need to strike before then." Jake pointed to the display showing the Council's command structure. "What about their leadership? If we can capture or eliminate the High Arbiter and his inner circle, the fleet might hesitate long enough for Earth's defenses to prepare." Martinez shook his head. The Council leadership is on Zentara Prime behind planetary shields and a defensive fleet. We do not have the firepower to break through their defenses even with our new capabilities. But Jake was studying the intelligence reports more carefully. Hidden in the data was information about a prisoner transport that regularly traveled between Zentara Prime and the prison stations in the Outer Rim. According to Resistance sources, Admiral Henry Brooks was being held on Zentara Prime after attempting to negotiate a peaceful solution to the crisis. We do not need to attack their main defenses, Jake said. We just need to get inside them. If we can rescue Admiral Brooks, he might have intelligence about their plans and weaknesses. Lisa looked up from her research with excitement. I have been analyzing the quantum patterns in the Architect database. There is something here about a species-wide consciousness network. If we can establish quantum links between human operators, we could coordinate attacks across multiple systems simultaneously. The plan began to take shape as the Resistance leaders worked through the details. They would split into 3 teams, with different objectives. Jake would lead a team to infiltrate Zentara Prime and rescue Admiral Brooks. Martinez would take a second team to sabotage the Starbreaker weapon before it could be used against Earth. Lisa and Amy would form the third team, working to establish quantum consciousness networks and turn captured Council ships into human-controlled weapons. Jake spent the next few days preparing for the infiltration mission. The Corvin Resistance members taught him their camouflage techniques, while the Ashanti showed him how to hack Council security systems. Amy worked with him to develop his quantum consciousness abilities until he could interface with alien technology almost as well as she could. The prisoner transport arrived at Zentara Prime exactly on schedule. Jake and his team had replaced the original crew with human and alien resistance fighters using stolen Council uniforms and forged identification codes. The ship's quantum consciousness interface allowed Amy to control all systems remotely while making it appear that everything was operating normally. Zentara Prime was a massive world covered in gleaming cities and defensive installations. The Council had ruled the galaxy from this planet for over 1,000 years, and their confidence showed in the relatively light security around the prisoner facilities. They never expected anyone to be foolish enough to attack their capital world. Jake felt his heart racing as their transport was cleared for landing at the maximum security prison complex. The facility was built into a mountain with multiple layers of shields and automated defenses. But the security was designed to keep prisoners from escaping, not to prevent infiltration by someone who could control the systems with their mind. Admiral Brooks was being held in a cell deep underground surrounded by Council guards and monitoring equipment. Jake's team moved through the facility using stolen access codes and Corvin camouflage to avoid detection. When they reached the high-security level, Jake used his quantum consciousness abilities to take control of the prison systems. The cell doors opened silently as Jake disabled the alarms and security cameras. Admiral Brooks looked up in surprise as Jake entered his cell wearing a Council Guard uniform. The Admiral was older than Jake remembered, with gray hair and lines of stress around his eyes, but his expression sharpened when he recognized a human face. "Commander Sullivan," Brooks said quietly. "I hoped someone would survive long enough to mount a rescue operation. We need to get out of here quickly. I have information that the Resistance needs to hear." As they moved through the prison corridors, Brooks explained what he had learned during his captivity. The Council's fear of humanity went deeper than anyone had realized. Ancient prophecies spoke of a species that would emerge from a blue world and either unite the galaxy or destroy it. When humans appeared and began expanding rapidly, the Council decided to interpret the prophecy as a threat rather than an opportunity. "They are more afraid of human potential than human weapons," Brooks said as they reached the transport ship. "Our adaptability and creativity threaten their entire worldview. They have ruled through rigid control and hierarchy for centuries. The idea that intelligence could be flexible and innovative terrifies them." Jake felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place as they escaped from Zentara Prime. The Council was not just trying to eliminate a military threat. They were trying to prevent the fulfillment of a prophecy that might end their dominance over the galaxy. But their actions were creating the very outcome they feared. Meanwhile, Martinez's team had located the Starbreaker weapon aboard a heavily defended dreadnought in the staging area near Earth. The weapon was unlike anything in human experience, capable of generating quantum resonance waves that could destabilize the nuclear forces holding a planet's core together. Once fired, it would cause Earth to tear itself apart from the inside. Amy's quantum consciousness network allowed the resistance teams to coordinate their attacks, despite being separated by hundreds of light years. Jake could feel her presence in his mind as she took control of council ships throughout the galaxy. The sensation was strange but reassuring, like having a trusted friend standing beside him even when he was alone. The captured council ships began turning on their own fleets as Amy and other human operators used quantum consciousness to override their command systems. Council admirals watched in horror as their own vessels opened fire on Allied ships without warning. The rigid military hierarchy that had served them so well for centuries became a weakness as lower-ranking officers struggled to understand what was happening. Lisa's research had revealed the truth about human quantum consciousness. It was not just an ability to control technology, but a way of thinking that allowed for rapid adaptation and creative problem-solving. Humans could look at any system and immediately see new ways to use it or improve it. This mental flexibility was what had allowed humanity to advance so quickly, and what made them so dangerous to established power structures. As the Council fleet fell into chaos, Jake realized that the real battle was just beginning. The Resistance had proven that humans could fight back against seemingly impossible odds, but winning the war would require more than military victory. It would require changing the entire structure of galactic civilization to prevent future genocides against species that showed potential for greatness. The day of retribution had arrived, and humanity was ready to show the galaxy what they were truly capable of achieving. Admiral Brooks stood in the command center of the Resistance base, watching displays that showed Council fleets across the galaxy falling into chaos. Human quantum consciousness operators were turning captured ships against their former allies, while Corvin infiltrators sabotaged key installations. The rigid military machine that had dominated the galaxy for centuries was cracking under pressure it had never been designed to handle. The Council is recalling ships from outer sectors to protect their core worlds, Brooks told Jake and Martinez. They are abandoning their plans to destroy human colonies in order to defend themselves. But this gives us an opportunity we cannot waste. Jake felt the quantum consciousness network humming in his mind as Amy Johnson coordinated attacks across dozens of star systems. Her presence was like a guiding voice that helped him understand the bigger picture of their campaign. Through her neural links, he could see Council ships firing on each other as their command systems fell under human control. The Starbreaker weapon is still a threat, Martinez reported from his position near the staging area. My team has infiltrated the dreadnought, but the weapon is protected by quantum locks that require Council authorization codes. We need someone with access to the highest levels of their command structure. Brooks studied the tactical displays and pointed to a heavily defended system near the galactic core. High Arbiter Veltar will be at the Council emergency session on Zentara Prime. If we can capture him alive, we can force him to provide the authorization codes. But the planetary defenses are too strong for a direct assault. Jake felt an idea forming as he watched the chaos spreading through Council space. Their enemies were reacting with panic and fear because humans were fighting in ways they had never encountered before. The Council expected rigid military formations and predictable strategies. They did not know how to handle creative improvisation and adaptive tactics. What if we do not attack their defenses? Jake suggested. What if we make them invite us inside? Amy's voice spoke through the quantum consciousness network as she coordinated the resistance operations. I am detecting massive communication traffic between Council worlds. They are trying to understand how we are controlling their ships. Their scientists think it might be some kind of computer virus. Lisa Parker looked up from her research station with excitement in her eyes. That is perfect. If they think we are using electronic warfare, they will bring captured systems to their secure facilities for analysis. We can plant quantum consciousness interfaces in disabled ships and let them take our people directly to their most protected installations. The plan required precise timing and perfect coordination between teams scattered across the galaxy. Jake's group would infiltrate Zentara Prime using a captured Council science vessel that appeared to be infected with human computer viruses. Martinez would use the distraction to complete his mission against the Starbreaker weapon. Amy and Lisa would maintain quantum consciousness links to coordinate all resistance activities. Jake felt nervous excitement as their disguised ship approached Zentara Prime's outer defenses. The massive planetary shields and orbital weapons platforms could destroy their vessel in seconds if the deception was discovered. But the Council's own procedures worked in their favor, as security forces directed them to a quarantine facility for detailed examination. "Remember," Admiral Brooks said as they prepared to disembark, "Veltar believes he is fighting to save galactic civilization from a prophesied threat. In his mind, the genocide of humanity is a noble sacrifice to prevent universal destruction. We need to show him that cooperation is possible without undermining his core beliefs." The quarantine facility was a massive underground complex filled with Council scientists and security personnel. Jake's team posed as captured human prisoners, while hidden quantum consciousness interfaces allowed them to maintain contact with the Resistance network. They were taken to holding cells deep beneath the surface, where other prisoners from failed resistance operations were being held. Among the prisoners, Jake found members of extinct species that the Council believed they had eliminated centuries, Ago Corvin descendants who had hidden their true nature for generations, Ashanti survivors who had lived in exile for hundreds of years, builders whose construction technology had been stolen and their people scattered across the galaxy. "The Council has been lying to the galaxy about our extinction," said an elderly Corvin female named Seren. "They told everyone we died from natural causes or internal conflicts, but we survived in small groups, hiding our abilities and waiting for someone strong enough to challenge their power." Jake realized that the resistance was much larger than anyone had imagined. Across the galaxy, survivors of the Council's previous genocides had been quietly preparing for this moment. The human uprising had given them hope that finally someone could break the cycle of oppression that had lasted for millennia. Through the quantum consciousness network, Jake felt Amy's presence as she coordinated the escape from the quarantine facility. Security systems shut down in sequence as she took control of the installation's computer networks. Lights flickered and gravity generators fluctuated as human creativity found new ways to use alien technology. "The Council emergency session is meeting in the Great Chamber," Admiral Brooks said as they moved through the facility corridors. "Veltar will be there with the other High Arbiters discussing how to respond to our attacks. If we can reach them during the session, we might be able to end this war without destroying half the galaxy." The escape from the underground facility brought them into the gleaming capital city of Zentara Prime. Massive towers reached toward the sky while hovering vehicles moved in ordered patterns between the buildings. Everything was clean and efficient, and controlled exactly what Jake would expect from a civilization that valued order above all else. But now that order was breaking down as reports flooded in from across Council space. Ships were rebelling against their crews. Installations were shutting down without explanation. Communication networks were carrying messages that no one had authorized. The rigid system that had maintained peace through fear and domination was discovering that it could not handle creative chaos. Jake felt the quantum consciousness network expanding as more humans across the galaxy learned to access their hidden abilities. Amy's voice guided them through the city as resistance cells activated on dozens of worlds simultaneously. The Council had never faced an enemy that could coordinate across vast distances using only the power of consciousness. The Great Chamber was a massive dome at the center of the capital city, where the High Arbiters met to decide the fate of entire civilizations. Jake's team infiltrated the building using stolen identification codes and Corvin camouflage techniques. Security was focused on external threats and electronic intrusion, not on prisoners who had supposedly been captured and contained. Inside the chamber, High Arbiter Veltar stood before the assembled Council leadership explaining the threat that humanity represented to galactic stability. His forearms gestured dramatically as he described the chaos spreading through their territory. Behind him, holographic displays showed Council ships firing on each other while human-controlled vessels moved in impossible formations. "The humans have fulfilled the ancient prophecy," Veltar declared to the assembled arbiters. They are the species from the blue world that will either unite the galaxy or destroy it. We chose to prevent the prophecy through elimination, but our actions have only made it come true. Now we must decide whether to continue fighting or accept defeat. Jake stepped into the chamber with Admiral Brooks beside him as resistance fighters secured the exits. The Council Arbiters turned in shock at seeing humans in their most secure facility. Some reached for weapons, while others seemed to accept that their situation was hopeless. High Arbiter Veltar, Admiral Brooks said formally. I am Admiral Henry Brooks, representing the human resistance. We are here to discuss terms for ending this conflict before more lives are lost on both sides. Veltar's expression showed a mixture of fear and curiosity as he studied the humans who had somehow penetrated his strongest defenses. You want to negotiate after everything that has happened? Your species should be seeking revenge, not diplomacy. Revenge is a luxury we cannot afford, Brooks replied. The galaxy is too large and too complex for any single species to dominate through force. What we want is partnership and mutual respect, not the destruction of everything you have built. Jake felt the quantum consciousness network pulse with activity as Amy reported success in other operations across the galaxy. Martinez had reached the Starbreaker weapon and was preparing to disable it. Resistance cells were liberating prison camps and freeing survivors of other extinct species. The Council's authority was crumbling faster than anyone had expected. The prophecy spoke of unity or destruction, Jake said to Veltar. You chose to interpret it as a threat because you could not imagine sharing power. But what if the prophecy was offering you a choice? What if humanity's purpose is not to replace your authority but to help you build something better? Veltar stared at Jake for a long moment before slowly lowering his weapons. Around the chamber, the great chamber on Zentara Prime fell silent as High Arbiter Veltar considered Admiral Brooks's offer of partnership. Around the circular hall, other Council Arbiters received reports from across the galaxy, showing their fleet in complete disarray. Human quantum consciousness operators had turned hundreds of Council ships against their own forces, while resistance cells liberated prison camps on dozens of worlds. Jake felt Amy Johnson's presence through the quantum consciousness network as she coordinated the final phase of their operations. Captain Martinez had successfully disabled the Starbreaker weapon, removing the immediate threat to Earth. Corvan infiltrators were broadcasting proof of the Council's crimes to every inhabited world in the galaxy. The rigid authority that had dominated galactic civilization for centuries was crumbling in real time. You speak of cooperation, Veltar said to Admiral Brooks, but how can there be trust between our species after everything that has happened? We have tried to exterminate humanity. Your people have every right to seek revenge against us. Brooks stepped forward with his hands open and empty, showing that he carried no weapons despite being surrounded by former enemies. High Arbiter, revenge would be easy, but it would also be pointless. Destroying the Council would create a power vacuum that could lead to centuries of warfare as different species fight for control. That is not the future humanity wants for the galaxy. Jake watched the Council Arbiters' faces as they processed this unexpected response. They had prepared for human demands for surrender and punishment. They had not expected an offer to share power and work together toward common goals. Their rigid thinking had not prepared them for the possibility that their enemies might choose forgiveness over retribution. What exactly are you proposing? Asked Arbiter Kethren, a tall being with crystalline features who represented the Zelani species. The current galactic government has existed for over 1,000 years. You cannot simply dissolve it and expect stability to continue. Lisa Parker activated a holographic display showing the results of her research into ancient galactic history. The images revealed the truth about previous civilizations that had ruled the galaxy before the current council. Each had eventually fallen due to the same pattern of fear and oppression that had led to the current crisis. The architects ruled through technological superiority until they were overthrown by a coalition of younger species, Lisa explained. The dominion that came before the current council fell when their client races rebelled against economic exploitation. Every galactic government in recorded history has eventually collapsed because they tried to maintain power through domination rather than cooperation. Admiral Brooks nodded as Lisa's presentation continued. What we propose is a new form of galactic government based on voluntary association and mutual benefit. No single species would have veto power over the others. Decisions would be made by consensus among representatives of all member civilizations. Jake felt the quantum consciousness network pulse with activity as humans across the galaxy responded to the negotiations. Amy's voice carried their collective hope and determination as she maintained communication links between resistance cells that were now transitioning into relief operations. Instead of continuing to attack Council installations, human forces were providing medical aid and humanitarian assistance to populations affected by the conflict. The humans are already demonstrating what this cooperation could look like, reported Arbiter Celine, whose people had suffered under Council economic policies for decades. My intelligence sources say that human medical teams are treating wounded Council soldiers in the Outer Rim territories. They are sharing food and medical supplies with civilian populations that supported the Council war effort. Veltar's expression showed confusion and surprise at these reports. The Council had prepared for human vengeance and retribution. They had not anticipated compassion and mercy from a species they had tried to exterminate. The cognitive dissonance between their expectations and reality was forcing them to reconsider everything they believed about human nature. Why would they help people who supported their enemies? Veltar asked. Because that is what humans do, Jake replied. We adapt and improvise and find solutions that others cannot imagine. The Council feared our technological advancement and military potential, but those were never our greatest strengths. Our real advantage is that we can look at any situation and see possibilities for improvement rather than just threats to eliminate. Through the Quantum Consciousness Network, Jake shared his memories of human history with Amy and the other operators. Images of humans helping former enemies rebuild after wars. Scientists from opposing nations working together on research projects. Competitors collaborating when faced with common challenges. The pattern repeated throughout human civilization. Captain Martinez's voice came through the communication system as he reported from the disabled dreadnought. Admiral, we have secured the Starbreaker weapon and arrested its research team. But the interesting thing is that half of the Council scientists working on the project have requested asylum with the Resistance. They say they never wanted to build a planet-killing weapon, but were forced to do so by their government. This news seemed to affect the Council arbiters more than the military defeats they had been suffering. The idea that their own people were defecting to join the human cause suggested that the problems with their government went deeper than external threats. Internal dissatisfaction with Council policies had been building for years before humanity ever appeared on the galactic stage. Perhaps, said Arbiter Kethrin slowly, the prophecy about the species from the Blue World was not about destruction or domination. Perhaps it was about transformation and renewal, a chance to build something better than what came before. Admiral Brooks smiled as he saw understanding dawning in the Arbiter's expressions. The Galactic Alliance we propose would include reformed Council species as founding members alongside humanity and the other resistance groups. Everyone who wants to participate in building a better future would be welcome regardless of their past actions. Jake felt hope and excitement flowing through the Quantum Consciousness Network as humans across the galaxy learned about the peace negotiations. The war was ending not with conquest and revenge, but with the possibility of genuine cooperation between former enemies. Amy's voice carried the collective relief of people who had feared that their planet would be destroyed by the Starbreaker weapon. What guarantees do we have that this alliance would not eventually become as corrupt and oppressive as previous galactic governments? Veltar asked. Power has a way of corrupting even the best intentions. Lisa activated another display showing the Quantum Consciousness Network that connected human operators across the galaxy. The technology we have developed makes traditional power structures impossible to maintain. Information flows too freely, and coordination happens too quickly for any small group to monopolize control. The Alliance government would be transparent by necessity. Jake demonstrated by accessing the quantum consciousness interface in the chamber and sharing his thoughts directly with Amy and the other human operators. Within seconds, every human in the galaxy could know exactly what was happening in the peace negotiations. There could be no secret deals or hidden agendas when consciousness itself was networked. This ability to share information and coordinate action across vast distances would prevent the kind of isolated decision-making that led to past abuses of power, Admiral Brooks explained. The Alliance government would be accountable to its citizens in ways that no previous civilization has ever achieved. The negotiations continued for hours as the Council arbiters worked through the details of transitioning from their old system to the new Alliance structure. Some species would need time to adapt to the idea of voluntary cooperation instead of hierarchical control. Others were eager to embrace the changes that would give them a voice in galactic affairs for the first time. Jake watched through the quantum consciousness network as the transformation began across the galaxy. Former Council species were forming committees to participate in Alliance planning meetings. Liberated prison populations were returning to their homeworlds to rebuild civilizations that had been suppressed for centuries. Human medical teams were working alongside former enemies to treat the wounded from both sides. Captain Martinez arrived at Zentara Prime with a delegation of resistance leaders representing dozens of species that had been thought extinct by the Council. Their presence in the Great Chamber was living proof that the galaxy was far more diverse and resilient than the old government had ever acknowledged. The first meeting of the Galactic Alliance will be held on neutral ground, Admiral Brooks announced as the negotiations concluded. Every species that wants to participate will send representatives to help draft the charter for our new form of government. Humanity will have one voice among many, not a dominant position. Jake felt pride and satisfaction flowing through the quantum consciousness network as the peace agreement was formally signed. The day that had begun with the threat of human extinction was ending with the birth of a new form of galactic civilization based on cooperation and mutual respect.